Very beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, Plattsburgh. Oh, it's a better morning than that. Good morning, Plattsburgh. All right, that is better. It is truly my pleasure to be here. As you heard from my good friend, Senator Betty Little, who is just a phenomenal advocate for the North Country. Let's give her a round of applause, Senator Betty Little. I love the North Country. I always have. Been coming up for, I don't want to tell you how many years, but for those of you who are here all the time, you should never take it for granted. You know, it is a special place on the planet. It really is. There is a beauty to the North Country. There's an energy, there's a light, there's a charm to the North Country that is really, really just precious. And I just sneak up whenever I can when it gets really ugly in Albany, which it still can get ugly in Albany. I'll sneak off and I'll come up it just clears my head and centers me, and it's really beautiful. I normally like to drive up. We flew in today because I was coming up from downstate, and it really, really was a beautiful flight, and I just was thinking how lucky you are. I know you don't feel that every morning when you get up and it's a little cool in the morning, but it's a special gift. And to SUNY Plattsburgh, it is a great institution. It's my pleasure to be back again. You have a great president. Not only is he a great leader, but he's also a great guy. You know what he said? Any student who is here today, 5 points extra credit. Isn't that nice? Let's give him a round of applause, President Etling. You heard from my other colleague, Janet Dupre. It's a pleasure to be with her, and Assemblywoman Teresa Sayward. I think listening to the President and Betty, the difference in last year, people say, well, how did you make all this progress in state government when it had been so bad for so long? If you could point to one factor, I think it's what you heard from the speakers before. It is that we said to a conscious decision last year to say, let's put the politics aside. We're Democrats, we're Republicans, whatever that means, we're New Yorkers first. And let's put our own personal agendas aside. Let's remember the people's business, and we're here to represent the people, and we have more commonality than differences, and let's stop fighting and stop yelling, and let's listen to each other, and let's find commonality and find compromise. And we did that, and it worked, and I applaud my colleagues for that, and it's a pleasure to be with them. As you heard, this is about 13 months. I've been governor for about 1 year. Feels a lot longer some days. And it was a long year. We got a lot done, but it was a long year. I was at an event a couple of weeks ago, and there was a woman who I've known almost all my life. I hadn't seen her in a while. And she came up to say hello, and she got right in front of me, and she was about to say hello, and she did a little bit of a double take. She in her face, she stepped back a second. And she said, I was just going to say, you look, I said, the word is older. She said, I was going to say more distinguished. I said, yes, because you didn't want to say older. So it was a long year, but it was also a very, very good year. And it was a highly successful year. We now want to use that success as a stepping off point to do even more, right? We had a good year, but we had a bad 15 years previously. And we have a lot of big issues and a lot of big problems. So the real challenge is how do you take that energy from last year and increase it going forward. In the beginning of the year, a chief executive will lay out their vision for the jurisdiction. President will do the State of the Union. I do the State of the State. The mayor will do the State of the City, where you lay out the plan, the broad vision, and then you do the budget, which is the specifics of how you're actually going to get there, right? We just finished the State of the State in Albany. We finished the budget in Albany, the presentation. We'll now go through the legislation, the discussion, but it's the plan for your state. And rather than us talk about it in the Capitol and talk about it to each other, I want to take our plan, our vision for this state to the people of the state. Why? Because it's your community, it's your family, it's your state. I work for you at the end of the day. It's very simple. And I want you to know what our plan is because I want to know what you think. And I want your support, and I want your comment and your critique. So this is what we've been talking about the past couple of weeks in Albany, about what our plan is for this year. Quick look back at last year. As you heard, when we started last year, New Yorkers were hurting all across the state. This economic recession has wreaked havoc in people's lives on all different levels, from mortgage foreclosures, loss of jobs, etc. But people are in real pain. And the situation of the state government in Albany was that it was a government filled with scandal, it was ineffective, it was rife with partisanship. We had a terrible financial deficit. I don't know if you remember last year, but it was $10 billion, one of the largest in history. And worse than a fiscal deficit, there was a deficit of trust and performance and integrity. People didn't trust the government. It was that simple. And if people don't trust the government is impotent, because the government is a function of trust. It's like any relationship. It's only as good as the level of trust. And when citizens don't have trust in their government is powerless. And that's where we started the year last year. You had a terrible combination. People had problems. And the government that was supposed to be in a position to help didn't have the credibility or the capacity to help. And we were very honest at the beginning of last year. We said we're at a crossroads. We have a decision to make. We can remain dysfunctional and divided, or we can come together, put the politics aside, and reestablish our government, rebuild our state. And we did make the right choice. We chose to change the culture of Albany, because that's what it's really about. It's about changing the culture of the place, and to put people first and make that the priority. And last year's legislative session is going to go down in the books as one of the most productive in modern political history, literally. And the credit for that goes to the Assembly and the Senate. They passed the bills. They made it happen, and they have my respect. This is your delegation. You have Janet, Teresa, and Betty here. Let's ask them to stand and give them one more round of applause to show them our appreciation. You all look better in person, by the way. Your pictures do not do you justice. Quick list of our accomplishments. We closed the $10 billion gap. We enacted the first ever property tax cap, which is so important because the property taxes have been chasing people out of this state. Closed 3,800 prison beds we didn't need. We eliminated the MTA tax, which was very tough on small business. We passed the toughest rent regulations in 30 years. We started a whole new economic development campaign I'll talk about more in a second, called New York Open for Business, an affordable energy policy for the first time, and we provided desperately needed flood relief. And I'd like to pause here for a moment. You know, people forget the terrible damage that we had last year and how hard hit some communities were by Tropical Storm Irene and Lee. We had flooding, we had water damage. It was really, really terrible. And if it wasn't for courageous and competent and professional first responders, the situation would have been worse. And it was my first year, as I mentioned, and I was so inspired by the way New Yorkers came together to help one another. And to see that spirit of community in action and neighbor helping neighbor. But most impressive, the way the first responders rose to the occasion. When every instinct in your body would say to run the other way and to protect yourself, these first responders literally run into danger to help people and put their lives at risk to help other people save their lives. And we have representatives here today from the fire department, EMT, ambulance from Clinton, Essex, and Franklin County. I'd ask them to stand today and to give them a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you all. We also passed ethics reform and put certain measures in place to attack chronic high unemployment among youth in inner cities. And then we had another two accomplishments, one in the area of social justice, where the state of New York literally made history and led the nation in an act that is still having reverberations all through the nation when we passed marriage equality for all New Yorkers. But we didn't stop there, because Senator Little is exactly right. For decades, New Yorkers were burdened by a really unfair tax code. And it's this simple. Whether you made $20,000 per year or $20 million per year, you were taxed at the same rate in New York. How unbelievable is that? Same tax rate, $20,000 or $20 million. It was just plain wrong. We brought fairness to New York. It was a very simple principle that we enacted in December. The more you make, the more you pay. The more you make, the higher the rate of taxes that you pay. We also reduced taxes for the middle class to the lowest rate in 58 years, believe it or not. Now, 58 years is a hard period to get your head around. It really was a long, long time ago. Give you an idea how long ago 58 years was. It was 1953, 58 years ago. Gasoline was 29 cents a gallon. Last time taxes were this low for the middle class. Elvis Presley was registering for the draft. Jackie Robinson was playing second base for the Brooklyn Dodgers. First Corvette was created. That's important to me. I wasn't even born yet. I was just a twinkle in my father's eye. But my father had big plans even then. He was planning. It was a great year, 2011. And we did a lot of good work. And we have gotten a lot of good things done. But in many ways, we have only just begun. And now is the time to really get to work and to use the credibility that we established to take this state to a new level, building a new New York. We still have big problems, and big problems call for big solutions. And it's going to be about getting this economy running and jobs, jobs, jobs. And the challenge for us in Albany, how do you stimulate the state economy? How do you get private companies to create jobs? How do you make sure there are jobs for you guys who are graduating, right, from SUNY Plattsburgh? How do we get the private sector to create jobs and use the state government to stimulate those jobs without spending a lot of money? Because the state doesn't have a lot of money to spend, because we want to keep taxes low, because that's probably the best thing we can do to stimulate the private sector economy. So it's all about getting the economy to work first. New York is a destination location. The largest industry in this state, tourism. Tourism, $50 billion in New York in 2010. People like to come here. We're an attraction. They talk about us all across the globe. But you have to stay ahead of the competition if you want to remain the tourism attraction that we are. Convention centers are a major economic magnet for a state. Why? Because they attract trade shows, etc. New York, at one time, had one of the largest in the nation. Over the years, it has become obsolete, basically. And we are now the 12th largest convention center in the nation, which means we're no longer competitive for the really big shows. This year, we want to build the largest convention center in the nation. We want to be able to attract international shows, remain an international tourism destination. We want to say if you have a show, if you have a tourism event, New York is the place to do it, and we'll have the largest venue in the country. We want to go from number 12 to number 1 this year because that's where New York should be. It should be the first in the nation, and we want to be competitive. We need to get serious about economic development. Again, this year, like we were last year, we had a great success story. You heard about the North Country success in the regional development councils. And Tony Collins, who is here and smiling in the front row because he picked up the big check, and that's him smiling with Gary in the picture. But it was a very simple but profound acknowledgement by the state that there is no one-state economy. There are regional economies in this state. And what works in the North Country is different than what works in Long Island and what works in the Finger Lakes. So if we want to get the economy running, you really have to develop that regional economy. And you really have to bring the business community of the North Country together with the government people from the North Country, together with the academic people, the healthcare people, and come up with one comprehensive vision for that region that everybody agrees with and everybody buys into. And then the state can help by investing in that region's economic development plan. That is exactly what we did last year, but we made it a competition. And we said we're not just going to fund everyone's dreams, we're going to fund the most viable plans. And the North Country came up with one of the best in the state, and they were funded, and we want to do it again and have a second round of regional empowerment zones because they're working, so let's build on our success. Another potential economic engine is casino gaming. Now, casino gaming, in a perfect world, I don't believe I would support casino gaming. Why? Because casino gaming is gambling. Some people win, some people lose, but it wouldn't be the perfect vehicle for economic development. But we don't live in the perfect. And it's also time that we confronted reality in this state. Now, here's the situation. If you ask people, is New York State in the gambling business, in the casino business, they will say no. Why? Because our state constitution prohibits gambling. So we are not in the gambling business. We don't have casinos. Except we have casinos on Native American reservations. Why? Because they are exempt from the state constitution. So we have casinos on Native American reservations. And then because we couldn't go into the casino business, we went into and developed another business called the racino business. What is the racino business? Racinos are casinos with an R. That's what racinos are. We couldn't call them casinos, so we called them racinos. And we have racinos and tribal casinos all across our state. And we're surrounded by casinos in the other states. We have 29,000 gambling machines in the casinos and racinos. That is more than Atlantic City. So we are in the casino business. We don't admit it, we don't say it, we don't regulate it that way, we don't tax it that way, we don't protect our citizens that way, because if you really acknowledge the reality that you're in this business, then you would be doing it much differently than we're doing it. I say let's recognize the reality, let's recognize where we are, let's amend the Constitution so we can do the same types of activities we're doing now, but maximize the profit for New Yorkers and protect New Yorkers at the same time. Because we're there anyway, let's amend the Constitution and let's do this business right and maximize the jobs and the profit for New Yorkers here at home. I also think this is a great opportunity to rebuild New York. We need jobs. We need to rebuild our infrastructure anyway. 32% of our bridges are rated deficient, 40% of our roads, 83% of our state parks and our major dams are in disrepair. I want to accelerate our capital plan, do massive infrastructure reconstruction immediately, creating jobs and economic activity, and we have to do the work anyway. Our accelerated plan would do 100 bridges statewide, 11 in the North Country, 2,000 miles of roads, including 330 miles of roads in the North Country, 20 miles in Lewis, 30 miles in Essex, 30 in Clinton, 40 in Hamilton, 45 in Jefferson, 50 in Franklin, 100 in St. Lawrence. Why so many in St. Lawrence? I don't really know, but it's big. I don't know if it's that big. I'll figure that out when I get back to Albany. 88 municipal water systems, which is very important. You know, we've had a lot of challenge and pressure on our infrastructure from these storms and floods, and this work is very important, and I want to get it done this year, especially these flood control projects, which we've experienced firsthand. Also, you want to build the economy, you need power to literally fuel the economy. There's also a great economic opportunity all across our state when it comes to power, because now is the time to construct an energy highway where in this state we can connect the demand for power with the supply for power. You have tremendous supplies of power. In the North Country, on the Canada border, hydropower in western New York. There is a great economic opportunity to provide that power to areas of the state that need it. You have a tremendous demand in downstate, tremendous supply upstate. Let's build an energy grid. Let's build a transmission service that can connect the supply to the demand. I believe it's going to be the equivalent of what Eisenhower did in the 50s with the highway system that generated a whole economy in the nation. We need now an energy transmission system. It will be a state master plan system, but it'll be a privately built system which will generate $2 billion in infrastructure. When you add all of that up, it's about a $25 billion investment in the state, leveraged by $1.5 billion, which would create tens of thousands of jobs and make a significant difference in the trajectory of this economy. We also need to focus on our priority mission this year, which is what? Which is after jobs and the economy. I believe the priority mission for every elected official in this state is the public education system, period. I learned my most important lesson as a rookie governor, my first year, in the area of public education. What I learned is that public education is really big, big business in the state of New York. And I learned that in Albany, everyone has a high-priced lobbyist when it comes to education. The superintendents, they have high-priced lobbyists. The principals, they have lobbyists. The teachers have lobbyists. School boards have lobbyists. Maintenance personnel, they have lobbyists. Bus drivers have lobbyists. You know the only group that doesn't have lobbyists working for them in Albany? You guessed it, the students. Well, this year, that is going to change. I'm taking a second job. I'm going to be governor of New York and student lobbyist. I'm doing it as I'm going to do it on a pro bono basis, so I don't have any ethical problems with second salaries like that. I don't want my colleagues to worry. But that's what I'm going to do, because we have a crisis in education. And it didn't happen overnight. It has been happening for years. And what's really happened is that education has become more about the business interests than the student interests. And I saw that firsthand last year. It's a business. And that's what I mean by the lobbyists. It's about the business interest more than the students. And there's a reform movement all across this country that is now shifting the focus back to the student rather than the industry, and student achievement rather than industry funding as a measure of success. New York State pays more money per student than any state in the nation. More money per student than any state in the nation. Number 38 in terms of graduation rates. Think about that. We spend more than any state. We're number 38 in terms of graduation rates. The answer isn't more money, more money, more money. The answer is performance and product for the money that we're spending. And it has been this obsession where it's about funding for the industry rather than focusing on what's actually working for the kids. And it's going to be a change, a fundamental change in our thinking. It's not about the process of education. It's going to be about the results. It's not about the system, the system, the system. It's about the individual who's trying to get an education. It's not about the salaries and the pensions of the people who work in the education system. It's about the graduation rates and the test results of the children who are supposed to be served by the education system. It's not about the bureaucracy and protecting the bureaucracy and enhancing the bureaucracy. I don't represent the bureaucracy. I represent the student. That's who I'm here to represent. It's not about the adults, it's about the children. It is that simple, but it is that profound a change in thinking. We need to focus on the performance of the education system. We're very good at throwing money at it. We have to find out what's working and what's not working. There's supposed to be a teacher evaluation system, which would be the first real measure of what works and what doesn't work. A teacher evaluation system, which would then lead to a school evaluation system, school district evaluation system, so you could actually know what's working and what's not working. And what teachers are doing very well, and what are they doing right, and how do we learn from them? What teachers need help, and let's get them the help we need. 2 years ago, we were supposed to put in a teacher evaluation system, which is the basic building block for a performance system. We qualified for a federal grant called Race to the Top. We got $700 million because we were going to put in a teacher evaluation system. You know what happened 2 years later? What's your guess? 758 school districts. No teacher evaluation system. Federal government called up, they want their $700 million back. But forget just the federal government wanting their money back. You can't have 2 years and no evaluation system. Well, why is there no evaluation system? Because the bureaucracy doesn't want to put it in. And they're fighting. And how do you measure? And what do you measure? And who decides? And I decide, you decide, we can't decide, so nobody decides, so we do nothing. And doing nothing is fine with everybody who really don't want to do anything anyway. And it's another 2 years gone by. So the bureaucracy wins for another 2 years. The students, the children, they lose for another 2 years. Well, this is a crisis, and we must act, and this is what we're going to say. State Education Department is sitting down with the unions, the way they've been sitting down with the unions for the past 2 years, trying to work out an evaluation system as a state-endorsed template. If the State Education Department and the unions do not agree on an evaluation system by February 16th of this year, this month, I will then submit my own evaluation system, because I know a little bit about education too. I'll submit my own evaluation system for the legislature to pass my evaluation system. Once we have an evaluation system, we'll send it out to all 758 school districts. They will have 1 year to put it in place. If they don't put it in place, they will not be eligible for additional funding from the state of New York. So it's a very simple rubric. It's a simple equation. No evaluation, no money. Period, for dramatic effect. If we are serious about public education, and if we are serious about public officials, and we all talk about how important public education is, if we're serious, we will do this. And we will do this now. I believe New York is on the way back. We have a great agenda that is going to make a real difference all across the state. It is an ambitious agenda, I am telling you that. It is major reform, and it is a controversial agenda. Why? Because it requires change. This is massive change. And change is very hard. Don't kid yourself, change is hard. Change is hard on every level. We say that we like change, but we really don't. Everybody's in favor of change. When you say, do we need change? Yes, we need change. We need a lot of change. We need bold, radical change. Really. But if you then dig down a little bit, you find out that people are really saying, you need to change. They're doing just fine. You need to make a lot of changes right away. But they're doing just fine. They want to keep doing what they're doing, and they want you to change. So change is hard. And this is major change for the state. This is major change for the education system. And the education system is a very, very powerful system in this state. $20 billion business in this state. One of the largest areas of the state's funding. So we're going to try to make these changes. But change really comes when you make it happen. And to our young friends who are here today from the school, you know, sometimes it's easy, and the temptation is to point fingers at people and tell them what their responsibility is and what they need to do in life, and what the senators should do, and what the assemblymen should do, and what the governor should do, and what the mayor should do. That's helpful. But change really happens when you decide to make the change. Change starts with the person in the mirror. That's when change starts. And we're going to try to do this. But there's going to be a lot of resistance. And I need you to help make this change possible. And that's... You want to see this state change? You want to see this state head in a different direction? You want to see this public education system change? Then you get involved. And you say to your assemblymen and your senators and your elected officials, I support you. You send an email, you send a letter, you show up, you read about what's going on, and you have an opinion. Democracy works when the people engage. When the people don't engage, the special interests win. And the lobbyists win. And the money wins. And that's the scale. Democracy only works when the people take the time to get engaged. We had a great year last year. We can have an even better year this year. I believe with all my heart that this state has a future brighter than it has ever seen before. I was in the federal government for 8 years. I worked in every state in the nation, literally. No state has what we have. No state. You look at our assets, our geography, our history, our healthcare industry, our academic industry. Nobody has what we have. We just haven't had a government as good as the people of this state. That's the one thing we've been missing up until now. We're on the right track, and with your help, we're going to take this state to a level it's never been to before. It's going to be my pleasure to do that with you as your governor and with my colleagues in the legislature. Thank you for being here today. Thank you, and God bless.